I don't want to focus too much on you.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want me to either. But what I want to try to present today is part of my centrist edgelord thing, which I introduced on the channel Pugio Fide, which I don't know what we're going to do with that channel. But we're working it out. We're working it out a while back. And I want to apply it to the conflict in the Middle East. And I really do think that I have an insight that I've not heard anyone else say that people could pick up on. And it has to do with looking at the philosophical and historical and religious like superstructure here that people like Dan Bilzerian miss, that Israelis miss, that many Jews miss, that even anti-Israeli Jews miss. And I just think it's a real contribution to the discussion. Okay. But it requires that you start making little diagrams, because I'm a diagram type guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm a visual thinker, but I'm definitely like a diagram type person. This is why I use my hands so much, because I'm making little diagrams for everyone to see with my hands. And I'd love it if you, and I think you'd like to do this, like find a way to present that information in a way that's more graphically attractive and people can refer back to, because it's in my mind pretty solidly.
Yeah.
But okay. So And
I'm working on it.
And what I like
a little research.
And what I like to do is present like a strong, solid middle ground on the Middle East conflict, because what you have here is a classic example of binary thinking going on. And I understand how the binaries are compelling, but you cannot. So you in a sense, you've got like Israeli edgelords killing women and children, brutally genociding them. But on the other hand, you have people like Dan Bilzerian who are saying something like Jewish supremacy is going to destroy our world unless it's stopped. That's pretty edgelordy on the other side. And I think both of those extremes are like, I do think you can whoops.
Oh, hold on.
Now we're going to go back to this dynamic.
No, hold on. I got it. Okay.
Both
testing stuff. Sorry.
Did that affect the screen?
No.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the Bilzerian thing marks like a kind of, I don't know. Well, anyways, I don't want to get into the Bilzerian thing initially. I want to talk about a little bit about history. We were talking about that before.
All right.
And so I want to set something up. Okay. Right. So, and I also want to tie it into Catholicism. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Really quick. I want to be able, I feel like when you're talking about this, I want to be able to make it a diagram. There's a way that it works on the laptop that is not currently working with the iMac thing. I'm sure I can figure it out. But do you want to just hold on and like go on flow state or something like that while I figure out how to connect the iPad so we can do like the diagram thing? Or you just want to go?
No, I'll just go.
All right.
And you can do it as we figure it out.
Sure.
It's not like super necessary, but I do want you to pay attention to what I'm saying.
All right.
Because I like to be a teacher, not a monologuist.
Okay. All right. I'm listening.
All right. Let's take a step back, way back here.
All right.
Prior to the state of Israel, prior to the Holocaust, prior to Zionism, the ideas that were floating around in Europe are what are important here, because Zionism comes out of Europe. It does not come out of the Middle East. It does not come out of Asia. It does not come out of Africa. It does not come out of the South America. It's a European thing. Now, what are the ideas that were circulating in Europe? What is the milieu in which Zionism emerged? Okay.
Can I answer?
Grace.
Try to answer.
Let me start. I'm not asking you questions like you have to raise your hand in class and interrupt the class. Okay, I'm setting something up.
All right, go ahead.
Believe me, I'll let you know. I believe in class participation. Teacher's pet. Going to jail. Now, we have to recognize first and foremost that Christendom existed prior to what year, Grace? Do you know?
Christendom existed.
When was it broken?
15
yes.
something, 1514?
1517, approximately. Okay. Christendom. Okay. And prior to that was 1054 when the Orthodox broke away. But okay, what we have remaining in sort of Western Central Europe was unified until 1517, until the Protestant Reformation. And we're going to start doing the so-called Protestant Reformation. Okay. The Protestant Revolution, whatever you want to do. I'm not into that. But what it was broke Europe. Okay. And it pushed Europe. It pushed Western Europe. Okay. Which is important because like that's who we are today in America. We are the inheritors of especially English, but largely like Western European culture, whether we want to believe it or not, right? Africans are here. There are people of African descent here. They largely made no cultural contribution to like thinking because they lost whatever they had, and whatever they had was hadn't kind of encountered Christianity and was obviously in some sense an inferior culture. It was like polygamist, tribalism, that kind of stuff. Okay. I mean, not polygamist, polytheistic.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever.
Okay.
It's this, whatever. In a sense, primitive. Okay?
So the intellectual
all humanity has had to now, all of humanity has now had to encounter monotheism, strong, powerful, culturally ascendant monotheism, right? And which conquered the Roman Empire. And then after 1517 got messed up, okay, got confused, okay, faltered, whether it could have done better or not. It definitely could have, but 1517, Europe gets broken into Protestant and Catholic. England gets pinched in the middle. England doesn't know where to go, but King Henry VIII decided, though he was a devout Catholic, to break away. And so England has always been this kind of middle ground between Protestants and Catholics, and Anglicanism was an attempt to have a third way. Now, when he broke away, okay, to break away from the Catholic Church was the greatest sin, okay, and still remains like on the idea of Christianity. To break away from the unity, the spiritual unity of Christendom, which doesn't mean you don't have nations. It wasn't a Christian empire.
Yeah.
You still had independent kingdoms and territories and things like that. But there was a spiritual unity under the Pope, right? Under the Pope as the leader of the church. King Henry VIII broke away from that because he wanted a male heir, which we could just attribute to it's just a lack of faith, you know. He just lost faith because he was like, I want to get rid of this bitch. I think it was Catherine of Aragon or something like that. And that she was a Spanish princess. She had family in Spain. It was somewhat political, but it was also just like the Pope's like, well, you can't just dump your wife because she's not making it happen for you. As much as they would have liked to keep England in the fold, they're just like, them's the rules. If you want a male heir, I don't know what to tell you. Doesn't seem like God's giving you one. Okay. King Henry VIII did a horrific thing to the English people and his own soul by breaking away from the Catholic Church. But we largely see that as like, who cares, right? However, in retrospect, I think we see like what happened there is in order to justify that subsequently, he didn't say it at the time. Subsequently, you had the emergence of Anglo-Saxonism, a justification for the breakaway by saying our people are better than other people. Now, that is, I think, the origin of racism.
Okay.
And it combined later. Well, you have Darwinism coming. We talked about that yesterday later, but that stuff was not in the air at the time. This is way back. When did King Henry VIII declare himself the head of the English Church? I'm not sure. You want to look that up?
Yeah,
sometime in the 1500s, I think. Not long after Luther did what he did, which kind of opened the door for it. So these are arch arch schismatics, arch heretics. And you can see
1534.
Okay, 1534, Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy to find the right of Henry VIII to be supreme head on earth of the Church of England, thereby severing ecclesiastical links with Rome. Okay, and again, like there were a lot of people who wanted him to do this because they just wanted to take over and have dominion over Rome's churches, right? So all of a sudden, it's just like be like today, if the church over there, that's the Catholic Church, just someone takes it over and says like, it's now Lutheran, right? You steal all the property, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though you say like, well, this is a true church, but like in a sense, Rome loses ownership, you gain ownership. It's theft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's theft unless it's like warranted, but it wasn't warranted.
Yeah,
it was defiance of the Pope's legitimate authority, which Henry VIII, I don't know, like whatever. Okay, so it happens. Okay, so you have the emergence of racism. Now people will say, well, are you kidding me? Prior to 1534, racism didn't exist. I don't think there was a kind of, I think prior to 1534, people, there was the beginning. You have to understand, like, all of this stuff of nations emerging, England emerging, relatively recent in 1534. Prior to that, you just had movements of people. Then you had the Roman Empire before that. The Roman Empire did not actually claim to be, it was not racial. Okay, so the Roman Empire did not have people theorizing that Italians were the superior race. And they wouldn't have used the term Italians because it was like the kingdom of Rome, the kingdom of Naples, the king of Naples, the kingdom of Sicily. But they had a kind of supremacy, but they didn't do this thing that occurred with the British Empire of saying it's natural that since we are superior, it is natural that we rule over others. Our people rule over others. And generally, Romans did not export Romans to go rule the territories because they were Romans and were therefore superior. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They generally left it like, you people rule yourselves, but just give us a cut.
Yeah.
And so it was like a kind of, it wasn't an empire in the way the British conceived of an empire. It was more of like a centralized mega alliance. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Instead of saying the Romans,
and that was the genius of the Romans, is that it kind of wasn't an empire in the sense we think, right? Like, say if you look at like India, right? So England goes to India and goes, these people are barbaric. Their religion is barbaric, but also they're inferior to us as people.
Yeah.
Now the genetic element of that like didn't come in until later, but this started, I think, with what's called Anglo-Saxonism. So you have this Anglo-Saxonism, which in some sense is like every other tribe saying we're better than you, our God is better than your God, that kind of thing. But it was something that people were really taught to believe. And it's based on this massive break which occurred with Catholicism, because it had to be justified, right? This thing that happened in 1534, right? If you can conceive of the medieval mentality, this would be the most horrific thing that could happen. Mass murder, genocide, less than this. Okay, because you're damning people's souls by cutting them off from the See of Peter, which means you're cutting them off from Jesus Christ's church.
Yeah.
And therefore God.
Yeah.
So way better to slaughter people than to do this. And you have to understand that. You have to understand the mentality there. And medieval historians would totally back me and say, yes, that's true. This was not seen as a small matter. We tend to see it today as like a kind of funny little story. This guy couldn't get
a male heir.
Couldn't get his balls to produce a male.
Yeah.
And so he did this kind of workaround.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And like, he looks kind of like a jerk, but also like you kind of get it. And like, you know, he was in some sense like, it was just sort of like ED in a way, right? It's like, but it wasn't literally ED. It was just like, I don't know. I can't shoot a male into there, you know, right? And and now I've gone through how many wives, right? And And now I'm like, fucked. Okay, so if we don't have a male heir, we have a major problem. Okay, but not nearly the problem. His problem was, of course, if you don't have the male heir, then you don't have a clear line of succession.
Right.
But of course, there are other things that can happen. Okay, but it does subject you to a male, let's say, cousin or a usurper or someone like that who's powerful coming in.
Yeah.
So, but compared to the sin of schism, it doesn't matter, right? So the Pope is not condemning Henry VIII and the Kingdom of England to destruction by saying, like, I can't do the annulment here.
Yeah.
But Henry got into this kind of binary thinking. Either I've got to get a male son, and it's not even selfish, really, because the succession only applies to like after he dies. Although it does, if someone wants to usurp the throne, they might do it before he dies. But he was clearly the legitimate king, seen by everyone as legitimate king. But we're not going to have King Henry IX, and I don't think there was a King Henry IX ever, even despite him doing this. Right? That was it.
I've never heard of King Henry IX.
Because if he had a male heir, it would be called King Henry IX. Not sure about the history there, but okay. So, but to say like, I really gotta, right? You could be sympathetic from like a natural like male thing. It's like, come on, I gotta be able to do this, right? I've gone through 7. I've beheaded women. Like, I've got to nut here, right? It's like this. It's like it must be like that guy, Relevant. Saying like, I can't get it up.
I can't get it up.
Come on, Darius. Let's get the whole crew in here. Let's get all of humanity like rallying so I can get an erection. Okay. And so from a male perspective, you can see it is funny and endearing and all that kind of stuff. But from so the church in some sense was more important than the state at that time, right? Anyone would say that, of course, like your soul is more important than your body. So the church is more important than the state. The church had enormous prestige, right? Because it was seen as like these people in authority, and especially the Pope, have proven over the course of now 15 millennia to be the legitimate authority. And it was generally recognized, although it started to get broken apart by, now interestingly, Luther in what country? Germany. And now Henry, for totally different reasons, because this was heresy. Okay, which means, do you know what that means?
Heresy is when you say something's true that explicitly goes against the church's teachings.
Yeah,
schism is when you break
the teaching, and this Henry had to do strictly with like the governing authority, right? So the authority.
Yeah.
So there's two types of authority the church has. Only those two: to govern the church herself.
Yeah.
Not to govern European powers.
Yeah.
That was worked out earlier in the Middle Ages. And to teach definitively, right, and to interpret basically the New Testament. Okay. So Luther attacked the teaching, Henry attacked the authority. Generally, we see heresy as a much deeper sin than governance, right?
Than schism,
schism. But like they're both lethal.
Yeah.
Because which apparently, you know, is another thing I want to talk about. It's a little bit of a side note, but like in Catholicism in America online is 100% about schism. Yes. I actually think every single major Catholic commentator is schismatic, including Michael Lofton. Schismatic. They're not in open schism, but they're schismatic. But they're also, but they claim to be fighting against heresy. It's people like Father James Martin and all these other people. And I do understand that like there has been a lot of questioning of the church's teaching on things in the liberal modern milieu. But schism as a way of avoiding heresy is insanity, right? That's exactly the logic of the devil. But anyways, so let's go back to this. So you find it interesting in the 1500s, Germany and England, and you find this throughout modern times. You keep going like, oh, so who are the big names? Freud, oh, Germany. Darwin, oh, England. Hitler, oh, Germany. Churchill, up England.
Quick question from the chat: is it possible for the Pope to be a heretic?
Good question. This has not been definitively answered, but generally the answer is no. It's not possible, and there's no mechanism, basically, to address that if it happens. So, what's interesting? The interesting answer to that question? It is the year 2024. The church started at the death of Christ, I would say. Clearly, Peter was the head of it. So we're now 2,000 years in of a succession of popes, right? Some of which there were controversies and difficulties.
Farzan says, "Isn't that a huge problem?" Yeah, well, that's what you're.
Well,
theoretically, yes.
One would think that if, in fact, the Holy Spirit did not give this gift to popes, that there would be examples of clear heresy. Now, there are examples of stuff that's like, right? But for the most part, it's amazing. Name any other kind of religious body that has like been so consistent, and that there is really no case to be made for a pope being a heretic. Were there private things where popes got, like whatever? Yes. But it's just been amazingly consistent. If you read history with an open mind, the history of the church, one of the things as a Protestant, becoming a Catholic, I was like, okay, well, that's an amazing
track record.
Track record, yeah.
Yeah.
2,000 years. And it's relative to what we're talking about also, because it also puts the pinch on those who rejected the church's claims. Because with every century that the church has difficulties and comes out of them, right? It just manages to like survive itself, its own like stupidity, corruption, all the humanity that's there. Because we're not saying popes are divine beings.
Yeah.
A lot of them were incredibly corrupt morally. But nevertheless, the teaching remains firm and true and unsusceptible to revision.
So
it's a powerful argument.
Theoretically, if a pope taught heresy, the entire Catholic Church would be in question. If he said, like, a pope can say something infallibly, right? There is a question
which is debated among scholars at some point. Well, what if that happened? They weren't saying it has happened, but they're saying, could there be something that happens? And in that case, what would be the cure for it? And it's kind of like, the answer is mostly, well, it hasn't happened, so I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And like, it's kind of one of these, the scholastics, like the scholastic. Are you aware of what that is? Like the late medieval, like Summa Theologica. They ask a lot of every kind of question you can think of and try to answer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That mentality was willing to like ask, these kind of obscure questions. Wasn't really an issue. It wasn't like, oh, this pope is fucking up. But it was just kind of like, okay, well, how does this work?
Yeah.
Interestingly, like only 15 centuries in do they even ask this question.
Yeah.
And the general answer is, it's not going to happen. If it were to happen, and there are all sorts of protections, of course, like popes aren't just picked out of nowhere. They're generally well trained. They can't refute anything in the scriptures. It has to be in harmony with previous traditions. So there's all these ways in which, as a pope, you're not like just like saying like, geez, what am I going to do here? You know what I mean? Like, it's very rare that the pope teaches infallibly. And when he does, it's stuff that's, in actual fact, he only responds to the authority of the church as a whole. So it's like something will surge up as saying like, we need to define this. And then he examines it and either says thumbs up or not now. Mm-hmm. He doesn't usually say thumbs down. He usually says like, so it's something which has been in conflict. So the Assumption of Mary is an example of that.
Yeah.
Theologians had talked about that. It hadn't been resolved, but there was a sense, and this is interesting relating to what we're talking about, after the Second World War, that the world needed some reassurance, and that it's weird for us to think about this as Americans, but that the Pope defining the Assumption of Mary was intended, in a sense, by the Holy Spirit to like reassure humanity and gather us together and create a kind of Marian peacefulness. It's a weird thing, but like that's how the Pope saw it at the time.
Yeah.
This is a response to World War II. To like, instead of saying like, mom is going to comfort us.
Yeah.
And we can be sure that she's bodily resurrected with Jesus in heaven. And so we can all calm down. It's been a rough century. But like it was kind of an affirming. It's weird, right? Like we didn't think of that.
We would
the
not
Pope
think of
defines
that,
the Assumption of Mary. What does that have to do with me emotionally? Like, but that's how it was seen at the time. Now, let's go back again to England. Okay, so you have Anglo-Saxon. This is generally not controversial. This is not me being an edgelord. Anglo-Saxonism emerged as a cope for England breaking off, because you have to understand the magnitude of what was going on there. So it has to be coped for more than by saying like the guy couldn't produce a male heir, like he got wound up.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The obvious response would be to say like, well, he fucked up. Let's reunite with the Catholic Church.
Right.
Right. But you had two things going on in England at the time. You had the Protestants were making their inroads, because remember, Protestantism is Germanic in its nature, right? It's Northern European.
Yeah.
So where there are Northern Europeans and the Northern European spirit, Protestantism caught on, because it was always this sense of our people, your people too, the Eastern Europeans and the Northern Europeans, who kind of resented the fat cats, the Mediterranean people, who had this superiority that like, but they weren't these wild. We always had the sense of strength, of like being wound up, right? You look at Martin Luther, he's a typical German, all wound up. And this thing comes out of that, you know what I mean?
The scream.
Our spirit is one of agitation.
Yes. Harshness.
Harshness, violence, and rebelliousness.
Yes.
Which the incredible superiority intellectually and culturally of the Roman Empire, then the Catholic sort of Catholicism tamed for a time, but it was always sort of on the fringes,
Yeah.
And there's always offshoots, and then eventually they were always waiting for some little chink to come in the armor, not Asian, but like and then it was ready to kind of penetrate, right? And then regret it and say like, oh God, we did it again.
Yeah.
We're so wild and violent. But I know that spirit, and you know that spirit too. That's why you sit there fucking blowing your nose.
Agitated.
Agitation.
Yeah.
We can't work a 9 to 5. We have to like raid, rape, pillage, and then come back, and then we have to have these crazy parties in which everyone destroys everyone else, and it's like Valhalla is just like this horrible place where these. Anyways,
Klaus Kinski.
But it's Kinski is a perfect example of the Nordic spirit.
I need a video of him just to play.
Spaniards,
that's what we're talking about.
Southern French and Italians have a more placid spirit. It's true. That's reinforced by like the intellectual tradition, and just the vast superiority of Catholic culture. It is superior, right? And the superiority of a culture you can't undersell, because we tend to think, oh, well, people clash and armies win. No, cultural superiority wins. And as an illustration of this, look at Asia in the last century. Western culture has completely taken over Asia.
Yeah.
They absolutely were like, no Europeans, no Europeans, no Europeans, no Europeans. Get them out of here. They keep making inroads. They make deals, and then we kill them, slaughter them. We want them out of here. We're doing our own thing. We have a legitimate civilization, which you can't argue with.
Yeah.
We have the whatever dynasty, this dynasty. Look at these fucking walls. We've got Japan's got its whole thing going, but like eventually they just caved completely. Japan, Korea, and China are totally obsessed with Western culture, right? And so the culture has profound. Now, where does that profundity come from? It comes from Christianity, which is a different spirit than what they have in Asia. And it just breaks the hive mind. It just breaks it. And they're like, that's better. It's better. we can't stop our kids from listening to like pop music.
Yeah.
So now we're just trying to join the club. And literally in China, what they come up with, spend billions of dollars on is like, let's recreate Paris here, like maybe. Right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a total capitulation. The government is saying, let's just like make our own Paris here, but it'll be just a replica of Paris because they're better than us.
Yeah.
And you find this throughout history. It's amazing. You know, the Russian Empire, like prior to the Russian Revolution, was obsessed with French culture. Okay, and so like to be cool in Russia was to be French speaking and like go visit and get your little gowns and stuff from France.
Yeah.
And it was just Russian culture was just seen as backwater, stupid. Like I'm sure they still ate their goulash, but it was like French cuisine, French women, French everything, French mistresses, French fancy shit. And you see it today, like with blacks. Gucci, Armani, right? It's an obsession with Italian, Ferrari, Bugatti, right? It's an obsession with, and there was an attempt to say like, no, let's do our own thing. Let's get these medallions. And it's like, that lasted about 5 minutes. Well, the browner, the darker, the better. It's like, that's 5 minutes and they're back like Gucci, Armani, Gucci, Armani, right? And it's fun. Yeah. It's interesting. Like you can't really, when people feel like this is better, you really can't tell them like this is harmful for you, even when it is. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Russian writers absolutely mock the French, though. That's true. In many ways, we see that French culture as like, why was this so appealing to you? It's so effete, right? All the like, all the wigs, all the powder, all the like. You see these dandies, like these guys who are like, look at what I got. And you just say today, like if someone was walking down the street like that, you'd be like, that guy is such a freaking homo. It's like crazy. Right. And, you know, but at the time, and they had great writers. More importantly, they had a Catholic culture that's still very, very appealing. And France still is the number one, I think, tourist attraction in the world. It has that. It has that. I was watching Rick Steves, you know, this.
Oh, Rick Steves Europe. Yes.
And he's going to like the Loire Valley, which is like right in the middle of France, all around the Loire River. It's just a river. Yeah, but there's these castles that you have to say like, oh my God, whatever these people were doing, it's the best. Yeah. It's the best. Yeah. And it still is today, right? It's like, that's what every girl dreams of. That's what every guy wants to like be the owner of, like this castle, right? So cool. And it just keeps resurging. It keeps like the whole entire fantasy genre is basically medievalism. Right? It's like late medievalism, Europe, right? It's like it's not a fantasy. It's just a memory. Yeah. And now it's interesting.
A time period.
Now it's interesting. The obsession on in media, like where is Viking culture, is Nordic culture, which I am always amazed by because I think it sucks so much. I'm so sick of seeing this guy with a big turkey bone going, right? And then and yet like the appeal of it, I think, is because it is super masculine, it's super warrior, it's the opposite of the PC culture. But if you look at some quantity of Scandinavian like architecture and culture, it can't even compare to like one neighborhood in Paris. It's
that is
just
true.
Bumpkin culture.
Yeah.
And Rick Steves will go up to Scandinavia and it's like, here's a bunch of red houses. Yeah. I mean, where is the cultural wealth? There wasn't any. And still to this day, I think that there are bumpkins in Norway who are fishermen and they're like, y'all, whoa, right? And then there are like educated people in Norway who are educated on the continent, or at least, right? Like no one goes like, oh, the University of Norway. Like there's nothing there. It's not rich. It's not, or they go to America and become like hoes, right? Become cosmopolitan because we got the Jews and we got the blacks and it's like cool. And then you can go back, whatever. But like Norway itself, it's like they're like, their weekly rituals, like, on Friday we get together and we have some frozen pizza from Tostino's. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Yeah. And then on Saturday, it's like Taco Tuesday. Frozen pizza and tacos. It's like ridiculous. And we watched the guy. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but we watched this guy who's like quintessentially Norwegian. He's impy, funny, and he just thinks the Norwegians are retards, right? And it's true. There is a lot of retardedness there. But they're so like cheap and like, I just like so insulated from everything, and
They're bumpkins.
Yeah, but they're also bourgeois bumpkins. Yeah. Like they're like nouveau riche. They're so like
yo.
It's funny, but like you can make an argument. Like what I find interesting, and I'm going off. What I find interesting is you get all these people in America who are become red pilled on blacks, right? Like, hey, wait, look at these charts, the bell curve.
Yeah,
it's true. Okay, yes. And what about these Jews that are all over the place here? Not really, but like they're running the show. That's also true. You're right, Dan. Okay, and they're like, we got to get rid of them. If we got rid of them, then we'd have a really great country because like white people are basically really nice. Well, go to fucking Norway. Go to Norway. It sucks. It sucks. It would be like Norway, or just go to Vermont. Go to Vermont and see how it's going. I don't understand. Like I could literally take you, the others, potentially. One, not so much. Their ticket's going to get, because you don't have that last name. And we could go to Norway and we could live like pretty cushy lives.
Yeah.
But I just think we'd be like, oh my God, where's the music? Where's the culture? It's like, we're serious for like 2 weeks. It'd be fun. Like, oh, it's frozen pizza night, y'all. This is cool. And like
they have the public transport with the no blacks on
your
the
brothers
buses.
would be able to bang all the chicks there because they're all whores, right? But they're never gonna have kids, right?
Yeah,
so
and we'd be like the cool Americans.
Yeah, you'd become a slut and your sister would become a slut.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, if we really assimilated.
Seamus says bad take, actually Norway is beautiful. I think Norway is geographically beautiful.
Norway is beautiful.
Of course, but the culture there.
But I'm saying an ethno state.
Seamus is what we're talking about.
Of like whites is, so yeah, I'm trying to, now one thing about the Bilzerian thing. Oh.
No, go ahead. I just thought you were going off. I was just going to get some water.
Okay.
Sorry.
You want to use this pad? You can use this pad to communicate with me.
Okay, sure.
Do you feel like you need some water?
No, not right now. I thought you were going off, so I was just going to go grab something while you were talking. Sorry, go ahead. One thing about the damn Bilzerian thing. Jewish Hollywood.
All right, I'm trying to get back around.
Yeah.
I am. This is in a large sense. This is like the beauty of centrist edgelords. The Bilzerian interview, can you do that like completely off camera? Like, can we do,
sure.
Can you do like Jesse Lee Peterson where you touches some button and goes,
yeah, sure.
Right? And you don't hear it. And then he
I can literally do it. How do I? La 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 la. There's supposed to be a mute button. Anyways, whatever.
So, all right, let me get back. So I'm going all over here, but like you've got to follow me, and this is beautiful. What I do is like I do like rambling. I do this rambling, but what I'm creating is an intellectual world, like a matrix of things to get more subtlety and get us out of these binaries. You need all of this information. You need to start thinking this way. Just follow me, and your brain will start to get trained. It's brainwashing.
Okay.
But it makes sense.
Okay, Svengali, go off.
So you start with Anglo-Saxonism, and this is new. The idea that a group of people are given a mandate by God through their nature, let's say. It wasn't genetic specifically. Through their nature, they are superior. They convince their kids that they're superior. They convince themselves that they're superior. And they have something to show for it because the British Navy defeated the Spanish Armada. Huge thing. Like the Spaniards were the dominant rulers of the ocean, right? They were the ones first who did this world conquest thing. So the English were behind them, but they came up and smacked them down. Okay, so then you say, oh, that's verification. Confirmation. First it was the Portuguese, right? You got to give them credit. The Portuguese were the first ones who went out. And they're just like, hey, we're boat people. What's over there? What's down there? We'll set up these posts. Very different type of colonization. It was mostly trading posts. It was just like, we can become wealthy in our little thing by just like starting these posts and like, look at all we can do. We put it on the boats. We bring it back up.
Yeah.
Bring it back down there, right? And they fuck around with us. We fight a little bit, but like we just want little outposts. We're not trying to Portuguese the world.
Yeah.
That came later. The Spanish then took it much dominant. They're like, hey, what's this little guy doing? Like, we can do it bigger. We're bigger, right? Bigger. We have more resources. We also have access to the ocean.
Yeah.
We're going to do it bigger and better. The Italians got in on it somewhat, although they were more Mediterranean involved. But like the Spanish were killing it, right? In terms of this stuff. And they're like, okay, we're spreading Catholicism. We're down with the Pope. We got rid of the Jews and the Muslims who invaded us. Like we're super strong. And then the English came along and smacked them down, which seems to confirm we're actually superior people, right? And to this day, generally we in the West see Spanish and Portuguese people and their colonies as inferior, right?
To English colonies, yes.
To England, and English culture is seen as superior to Spanish culture.
True.
And English colonies are seen as superior to Spanish colonies, right?
Yeah.
I have respect for Mexico, but you have to kind of like undo your programming to say like, I'm going to visit Mexico, right? Like generally people respect French culture. They will visit Spain, but they see Spain as like not really like one of those top tier countries.
Yeah.
In terms of like business and those kind of things, right? Like it's just seen as like a place where they've got oranges, they've got stuff, but like they're dirty. It's too hot. It's what you find always with Spanish, right? It's too dirty, too hot. Sort of overly sensual. It doesn't have that British kind of like, discipline, stiff upper lip. That whole kind of like thing that England had, which is like beauty, but also firmness, strength, power. The Spanish are seen as like too casual and laid back, right? That they really just want to like hang out in the sun. That's what Mexico is, right? Like everybody just wants to enjoy life. So they're never going to get together and have like a war against us. They just basically lost to the Anglo thing, which much more aggressive. All right, so I've proven to you that this became the dominant and remains the dominant thing in the West. Our landlord here, he's a short guy, balding, whatever. Okay. But when he speaks English, anyone would say in almost any country, if he's doing voiceover, it's like, oh, okay, well, that is the best. You're speaking English, which has dominated the world linguistically. It's a beautiful language, right? I mean, we have legit Shakespeare, like legitimate, like, right? It was able to blend with the African thing, make rock music and now rap music, and it's like taking over the world, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And we have this kind of like outward facing, and it's like empire, and it's like, okay, people just take it for granted. Okay, the United States is you understand this thing, manifest destiny, right?
Yes.
So manifest destiny is a sense that like world history, and therefore God, is behind the Anglification of the world. And you can make a really good argument. This is the problem with like dismissing English colonialism. It was a really cool thing.
Yeah.
In Africa, English colonies were like really beautiful. It was firm. It was racist, but it was also like they genuinely respected those cultures. There was a love of exploration and then learning, and they wrote stuff, and you could. It had the racial element. It had this like, well, I would say it wasn't racist, but it was ethnocentric, let's say. And then when Darwin came along, right, that's a second manifestation of it. First is this kind of sense we're better, and then you have this sense of evolution, which is trying to justify it by saying like, yeah, no conquering. That's what nature does. Nature's behind us. Then you have Hegel in Germany providing the philosophy. Hegel had this idea like there's a world spirit that animates everything. It's not Christianity, but it's like that thing that Northern Europeans feel, this like confidence, this desire to clash, and then it's actually coming from like nature. Okay, you have Schopenhauer, those type of guys. Okay, so it's always the Germans and the English together. Now, Jews also had Jews also had a lot of interactions with the Germans and the English, also the Russians and the Poles, but like, okay, the Germans are intimately connected with them.
Yeah.
So there is, of the Ashkenazi Jews, who are the relevant Jews we're talking about, their big issues, they're too basic where it ended up in the 20th century. They ended up adjacent to Germany and Poland, tons, and Russia also. And Germany was a big influence there, right? Because of course the Russians and the Germans are right next to each other. Poland's in the middle. No one really knows what Poland is. It's just like a buffer state, basically, still is to this day. No one respects Poland. Who goes to visit Poland, right?
Yeah.
The two much larger cultures on both sides. And the Germans are always trying to push into Poland, and the Russians are always trying to push into Eastern Poland, and those states, right? So what I'm saying is, the Jewish people by this time, okay, you have to understand, like, so this idea they have, the state of Israel has to do with the Bible. No. The two things that emerged at the time of Zionism that influenced it tremendously were German romantic nationalism and British imperialism, which is not really romantic. It's not as romantic, but it's kind of racial. Both of them had a racial dimension. Germany really emphasized the racial dimension. Blood is their thing, right? Blood, kin.
Yeah.
Like this kind of warrior culture, the tribe, or all this stuff. Made up. It's made up. Germans were different groups of people that had just been united in very late in the game. But much like Britain was an upstart to the Spanish empire, Germany was now an upstart to the English empire and wanted to take a piece of what, they're all competing. This is what World War I was. Basically, the Germans saying, like, we've come into our own. We have this genius. We can organize things amazingly. It's true. Highly intelligent, very organized, very aggressive, ultra aggressive, made the British look like pansies, right? The same kind of argument that they had against the Spaniards. Like, you guys are too chill. You're too like tolerant. You're too liberal. We really want to take over the world and like run everything personally, right? And we want to settle scores, and we want, and like we don't forgive anything, and also then tying it into the same kind of idea of the world spirit. Now they're way post Darwin, and they're saying, we got all this racial stuff too. We've got, and we're even going to reject Christianity altogether. We're going to take a step beyond Protestantism and say, like, we reject Protestantism and Catholicism, and we're going to like restore the warrior gods, sort of.
Yeah.
Right. But like, we see Christianity as a Jewish, right? No one in England was really saying this, as like a Jewish weakening. And we're like full on the fury of the North, the fury of the Norse, the fury of the Vandals, the fury of the barbarians, right? We own barbarianism, and you tie it into the Darwin thing. Barbarianism is the way in which creativity emerges. So they literally loved war. You have to understand this. They were passionate about war, and they thought this is the source of all creativity. And all this civilization stuff is bullshit. It's just pandering to the weak. It's just, right? But you see it gets tied in with the sense that, like, we're better than other people. And even though we would say today, like, that's crazy, you sound like a psychopath. Yes, it was psychopathic. All right. And it's like, and there was also this sense of like, do not compromise with the weak, slay them. You have to do what is hard to do. Nietzsche is all about this, like the Ubermensch, right? Like you have to be ruthless. It is the will to power that is the dynamic in life. You must dominate. You must act with violence, with unbelievable violence, without blinking an eye. This was a genuine like belief that they had, right? We must overcome this complacency, this weakness in humanity, which they saw in Russia taking place, where the Jews basically created this massive murder campaign of the existing order, right? They undermined the existing order and said, we're going to keep this going throughout the world. Marxism was like no little thing, even though Marx was German, right? Yeah. Okay. So they're like, shit. Marx thought it was going to take place in Germany where it's industrialized. It actually took place in Russia, which was a backwater. And like, but it, like tens of millions of people died like at the hands of the Russian Revolution. So
you mean the Bolshevik genocide? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah, you can call it a genocide. Holodomor. There are various, like Bogdan talks about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't really an ethnic thing, but it looks a lot like an ethnic thing. But like it was like oppressor oppressed. But like there were a lot of Jews who felt like it's time to wipe out like whole strata of Russian society.
Yeah.
All the way to the emperor. Like just no. Okay, but it wasn't the same thing as this romanticism. It wasn't romantic. It was seen as analytical and sort of oppressor oppressed. It was okay. The German thing is like German nationalism, right? We are German people. We're like the crack cocaine version of what the English think they are.
Yeah.
And we have all these theories. We have the science, right? But we have a bloodlust. We love war. We are open about it.
Yes.
We say conflict is the source of creativity. War is, right? The English were more like, like Christianity, like, we try to kind of ride both of these things.
Yeah.
Like, but we're sort of benevolent. But the Germans wanted like direct control, but they saw themselves regional. I don't think they wanted to control the world, but like they came across as like, like, they're just not going to play by the rules, right? So they're going to do whatever it takes, lie. They're basically thugs. They're basically like criminals, right?
And they
act
own
like
it
psychopaths.
Openly.
Right, but they're saying like this is our ethos. And like they're saying like really the British are just hiding behind this like semi-Christian bullshit. They don't believe in this either, which is true. Push comes to shove. The British Empire used massive force to get its way, to enact its will, but it hid behind this kind of like, well, we're civilizing, we're Christian, and we have our bishops and all this kind of stuff that we institute. But I think the Germans saw like, well, but in the end, you send your people, the Anglo-Saxon people, to rule over the subordinate sub-races, which is not what the Spanish did or the Portuguese did, because the Spanish and Portuguese actually blended. It's a totally different thing. It's a Catholic thing. Mm-hmm. They did not separate. They blended. They still had a sense like the Spanish are superior to the natives, but it was blended, and there was a sense like it's not a colony of like a superior. It was like the whole thing is this, it's more complicated, but it's very, very different. So when you talk about European colonialism, there are two different strains of it that are vastly different. And then if you add the German thing, that's very, very different. It was an innovation, right? It was an innovation, but you could see how it went from like Spanish Catholicism being triumphant, Christendom, right before that, Portuguese and Spanish like has this expansionism, okay? Then the British turn it into like, yeah, but it's us that are better than other people.
Yeah.
Then the Germans, but it's like the order of nature, but we're Christians. Then the Germans amp it up even more and go like, no, it's us, not you. And we have these incredibly wild racial theories.
Yeah.
And we abjure Christianity. We see it as Jewish weakening of the world spirit, which is oriented towards conflict. And from that conflict emerges creativity. It's radical departure, right? But incremental departure. Mm-hmm. Now, so there are other things going on elsewhere, but like that's the basic thing that happened. It's like a hyper Protestantism, if you think of it, right? Protestantism breaks away from Catholicism, but retains elements of Christianity.
Yes.
But it's basically northern people breaking away from the South also. I mean, it was a political revolt of the northern peoples against the southern peoples. You can't deny that. It's like, if you look at Protestant Europe and Catholic Europe, there's like a line right in the middle. It didn't just happen here and over here and down here and here. It's like the northern people, the spirit of the north rebelled against the spirit of the south, which had been dominant culturally.
Yes.
And this has been going on. This has been going on since the Roman Empire, right? When the Vandals broke into Rome, right? And so this is kind of subjugation and then revolt. That's right. We were saying that, right, Grace?
I'm following. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the important part about that is just like that's just a background. Okay. To this word Zionism emerges. Okay. It's a European idea. It's not a Jewish idea.
Okay.
It's not a Jewish idea. But okay, so this idea. Okay, so the Germans, now the interesting thing is like you learn from your oppressor, okay, because you'd think like, okay, whatever the Germans are doing, we're not doing it because they oppressed us.
Right.
Okay, but that's not how it works. And you know that from your experiences of being abused. In many ways, you adopt the thinking of your abuser, right? Yeah. And I'm not denying anything about the Holocaust or anything like that, but I'm saying in a weird way, the thinking there becomes your thinking.
Yeah.
So Ashkenazi Jews, not the Jews in the Middle East, not the Jews who are living among Arabs. They have no interest in this.
Yeah.
Just pass them by. But the Jews in Europe said, okay, we're going to pick up on this German ideal and the English ideal. Okay, now, so the German thing came from Germany was seen as an intellectual hotbed in the 1800s. Okay, in some ways, cultural dominance has moved from France to Germany. You've got all these philosophers, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Kant, all these guys, right?
Yeah.
So it was like kind of Germany and England were ascendant. France was sort of on the decline a little bit. Spain was long since like sort of seen as like not making any contributions. And so, right, you can see that even like Italy was seen as like, right, because in World War II, like it was basically Germany and England's colony of the United States. Then you had the French were seen as worthless. The Spanish were seen as who cares, right? Like Italy, who cares, right? Useless. They didn't have that ascendancy. So the hotbeds of intellectual ferment were first England, then Germany. England still remained like had a lot of prestige, but like Germany was this ascendant, new ideas, radical ideas, really exciting, right? Maybe this is going to solve the problems which we've been in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Jews who were largely population-wise in Poland and Russia, but there were some in Germany, and like this is where the ideas were coming from. You can see it's in that sphere, right? Mm-hmm. And so this romanticism comes about Germany. Okay, and of course they're saying like, and of course what they do is they see it as like, oh yeah, that is a good idea. People need a land. People need, right? And they become sort of envious, I think, of what the Germans are doing and see it as like a really good idea, except these are people who hate us, but we want to do the same thing, but we can't do it here. Right, so let's go do it somewhere else.
When are you saying this happened?
This is the
pre-Holocaust.
Yeah, this is like the 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century.
Okay, right.
Romantic nationalism was like it was the shit then, right?
Yeah.
Today, if you see people like today, romantic nationalism, like American, blood and soil. Like I forget what it is in German, für und friedlich or something like that, right? It's this kind of like, but it had a lot to do with the Romantic movement, the Romantic movement was a counter to industrialization, the kind of mechanization. People found it cold. People found it, kind of brutal, ugly.
Yeah.
So you have this romanticism. We took various forms, like there was like medievalism, like a lot of Catholics got into like, the medieval church, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And neo-Gothic movement. You found, right, it was this kind of return to like, I need something to make my blood, right? The poetry, like romantic poetry.
Yeah.
In America, you had the romantic movement. in poetry and music. You had Wagner in Germany. Again, it's like this passionate music that really makes your blood, stirs your blood. You had like sexual experimentation, Aleister Crowley going on, like with the occult, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to do with Judaism. Jews in the Holy Land, Jews throughout the world, we're not picking up on this at all. They're just doing their own thing. They're living with Arabs. It's a Muslim world. It's like these ideas are not
Except
hitting
for the
them
Jews
at all.
in Russia, they are picking up on.
I'm saying in Europe,
right.
There are two ideas that Jews are big on. One is Marxism, but the other is Romanticism, right?
Yes.
So the Jews were definitely behind the Russian Revolution, or heavily invested in it. Obviously, it's going to work for them to upend the existing order if they're on the bottom, which they were in Russia, and it was pretty severe how the Russians treated them. In Poland, it was a mix. In Germany, they were doing pretty well, but the Germans began to resent them and blame them for all the problems they suffered, many of which were the result of their own fanatical psychosis, right? Which everyone rightly detested as like, dude, relax, right? Stop, right? But I don't know. I don't know how accurate this is, but like, I do think World War I came from like Germany just refusing to like, right? They're just upstart, right? And they feel like the world is on their side. History's on their side. They're about to break through as like the new kind of empire that's going to take over the English, like the English took over the Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And like the Spanish took over like the new, like the non-European world and just dominated. Okay, so it's like been a series of dominations, right? And now the Germans are going to get their time in the sun. And they get the trains on time, and they've got the German, weaponry, and they kill it with the industrialization, right? They do better than the English in industrialization because they're psychos, right? And they'll just like work all day and be super crazy about precision and all that kind of stuff. So they're like, the English are in between, right? So English culture has this sort of reserved, chilled out aspect to it. Like, let's go hunting, whatever. Whereas the Germans are just like, especially in the northern Germans, if you ever met them, they're like, right? I mean, they're just, right? And they're very repulsive people. I think they're very angry people. Southern Germans, Bavarians, much nicer, but like these northern, I don't know. The Prussians are like unique in the world as like psychos. Anyways, so this thing becomes predominant. And they start really making inroads. It starts looking really good. Okay. It's all like Hitler made the trains run on time. Okay. That's just one aspect of it. But the Germans had a military machine that was like unbelievable, right? I mean, like a relatively small country compared to, say, Russia. It's just an industrial powerhouse.
Yeah.
It's killing it, right? Yeah. And to this day, we respect German machines, German cars, German precision.
Yeah.
It just is this kind of like they have this certain type of genius to like work together furiously for precision. Okay. And
we still respect it to this day.
Yeah. They were into science. They took all the English stuff and did better. Much like in the 80s, the Japanese took what we were doing in terms of like cars electronics and innovations. Like and they just killed it in their factories. It's just way better, way more precise. Everyone's working in harmony. Hive mind is killing it. So, but my point is, the Jews got this idea of blood and soil. Okay, these were not religious Jews. They were secular Jews for the most part, vastly for the most part. They weren't into their own religion.
Yeah.
In the foment of like between Bolshevism, which is hates religion, right?
Yeah. And
this kind of new like world spirit thing, which is anti-traditional religion, right?
Yeah.
Hegelianism, right? And like Schopenhauer, Hegel, Nietzsche, right? It's like it very much appeals to the Jewish spirit of like, of course, like we're rejecting like Christianity. Of course, we're on board with that. We've been doing that for now like 18 centuries, right? 19 centuries.
Right.
So of course these ideas are going to be very appealing to us. But then, so then Russia takes this idea like we are going to like we're going to redo everything in this utopia. But then a little bit to the west, there's this idea we are going to do what the National Socialists are into, a homeland for us that's like, finally we can be like the Goy, right? We can have our camps where the young Jewish, right? We can defend ourselves. We don't have to be a minority in a hostile environment.
Yeah.
So this idea of like romantic nationalism, okay, has nothing to do with Judaism. Judaism is not nationalistic. It was not nationalism did not exist prior to this time. Nationalism, the Roman Empire, there's very little nationalism. I mean, there's tribalism, but this idea of a nation, natus, right? We are born of the same blood, like this becoming a hyper thing, started with the English. It got transferred to the Germans because the English, it kind of got, I don't know, it didn't take that much, because you have this conflict between, when you have Christian nationalism, right?
Yeah.
You're going to run into this problem that like what you're doing doesn't match up with the Christianity, obviously, right?
Right.
You are going into these countries, exploiting these people, murdering them to a large degree, although you can say like, well, they just died of disease or whatever, right? You're treating them poorly. And at the same time, you're saying we're civilizing them and giving them Christianity. I mean, obviously, this isn't how Jesus would have spread Christianity to the New World. Obviously. Spanish were a little better, even though they were more brutal in a certain way, but like they didn't see themselves as better than the natives, I don't think, as human beings. And they saw the native, like, there was much more of like a kind of back and forth between like the kind of selfishness and the Christianity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With England, you have much more like, obviously we're just exploiting, but we're also saying we're Christian, but we just don't really care about that very much. It's like just about wealth and power for us because we're better.
Yeah.
How it ties into Christianity is unclear because and the whole origin of your thing is based on like the worst thing you can do as a Christian monarch, which is break away from the communion.
Yeah.
So you have all these kind of problems and, whatever. Whereas the Germans like liberate themselves from this part of it. And they're like, it's just raw. And then actually, this is the way the world is, and we should embrace it. Christianity is just like putting the brakes on nature, right?
Yeah.
Which, okay, so like we get it. And I find that actually, like there's a way in which you can respect that you can say, well, if you're not going to do the Christian thing, then do the pagan thing.
Right.
Unambiguously. And the English were kind of like trolling themselves constantly by pretending they gave a shit about Christianity when they really didn't, because obviously the first thing they would do is say, we're sorry for what King Henry VIII did. We want to rejoin. There's no justification for it whatsoever. And we're not better than other people. Okay. But, they were doing really well. They were killing it in a certain way. Right. But like their empire was destroyed by the first and second, but with the First World War, it was destroyed. Utterly destroyed, has never made any resurgence whatsoever. They're just the British Empire is a joke today, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So it was a big and like this is what you find, like the Roman Empire lasted a long time, was huge because it was like it really didn't give a shit about saying we're better than other people. It was just saying like let's make a mega alliance, right? The British Empire tried to like do that somewhat, but they're like, we're better, we should rule the world. It was extremely aggressive and extremely successful, but it also didn't last that long. And then the German iteration of this was super crazy. And because it was super crazy, it was super aggressive, caused millions of deaths, but like the Third Reich lasted, 40 years, right? I mean,
something like that,
20, 30 years, flamed out because it's so crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I see what you're saying. But
at the time, it wasn't only the Germans who were into this, right? But like, so these ideas were circulating, right? But like adjacent people started picking up on these ideas. And of course, for a group of people who hate Christianity anyways, or have no investment in Christianity anyways.
Yeah.
The idea of decoupling from Christian bullshit and just
Yeah.
going for it, blood and soil, our people,
Yeah.
is very appealing.
Of course.
Okay, but they got it from Germany. They got it from Christian people who shouldn't have done what they did, who got it from English people who shouldn't have done what they did.
Yeah.
So I think to say, okay, this is where I'm a centrist. So you find me the phrase, like it's called blood and soil. It's like in German, it's like Frauenfeindlich or something like that.
Blut und Boden.
Blut und Boden.
Blut und Boden.
Boden.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there's all these slogans about this kind of stuff, and you can see what it appeals to. You can see how it appeals. Like, I'm going to stand with my sister. I'm going to protect her, right? Right? Like,
Yeah.
just me and you. Like, and you, we could do this whole thing, romanticism. You could try to do it as a white supremacist today.
Yeah.
And these are our sons. Look at their blonde hair. Look at their strong limbs. And the Jews are trying to destroy us, or the Russians are trying to destroy us. We must stand together because united, right? It's all this. You see it all throughout, like Hollywood. They pick up on it, right?
Yeah, they do pick up on it.
This, what's the one about the guy, William of something, Mel Gibson?
Braveheart.
Yeah. It's the same thing. It's like, you see the king comes in to his foreign territory and like he rapes your women and you are absolutely gonna fucking get revenge, right?
Yeah,
it appeals to what Christianity came to stop us from doing. But of course, it's still there. Christianity only makes so many inroads. It doesn't change human nature. It's still there. And as soon as Christianity gets weakened, upsurges the desire for revenge, for blood, for sex, for payment, for, you know what I mean? For anger, right? You see it in your own life. Like, this is just emerges. Like, when the piety is gone, what emerges is just the ugliness of human nature. And we in the West, unfortunately, like, this enlightenment thing was like, oh, we're all good people. We just want to learn different things. Like, no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough to put a cap on the evil that is like surging within us, that wants to destroy, right? And among no people more than the Northern Europeans. And also, let's say a group which has for 20 years been coping for the fact that they fucked up.
What group? 20 years?
20 centuries.
Oh, 20 centuries. Yeah.
That's like, it's just been saying like, we said no and we're staying with it. Oh, God. Right?
Yeah.
And it looks like we're cursed until we get it right, but we're just not going to, right? And right?
Yeah.
It's just like everyone's saying like, okay, like, it's been 14 centuries. Let's try it again. Jesus was the Son of God, right? Like, the Messiah, he fulfilled all these things. And they're like, I don't see it. Right? 15 centuries, 16 centuries. They're wandering there. They cause problems everywhere. They get pushed back on. They get thrown out of here, and they're just like, yeah, no, I don't see it. I don't see it. Right? And so there's a psychology that's ready to like, I want out of here. Get me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And this philosophy very much appeals to them. Now, where do the English come in? Okay, there were some Jews in England. There were some Jews in America. Like, and it's more of the 20th century thing where they went west into cosmopolitan areas, but there have always been a smattering, right? Bankers, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But who is it that is put in charge of the project originally? The English.
In charge of Zionism?
Well,
because they were.
So they have this idea, we need a homeland. Of course, they're going to pick Palestine. I understand your thing is like, well, they could have gone to Uruguay, but like, it kind of makes a certain amount of sense to say like, this is our homeland. But in a way that has nothing to do with Judaism, right? It has to do with nationalism. We are a nation, not we are a religion. They weren't religious. Religious Jews thought this project was crazy because they thought the only way, the way that they're going to return to their homeland is through the Messiah. So who's the Messiah? Theodor Herzl? He never claimed to be a Messiah. David Ben-Gurion, these are all, I mean, look at it. Bibi Netanyahu, you think he's a religious man? He's not.
No.
He's not a religious man.
No.
Where does he get his ideas from? What is his religion? It's a combination of profound romantic nationalism, right? Romantic nationalism.
profound romantic
And
nationalism.
Anglo-American imperialism. That's where he
Okay.
gets his ideas from. He's not a devout Jew. It has nothing to do with Judaism. That's why this guy,
Dan Bilzerian,
when he says, like, I hate Judaism or whatever, he doesn't say I hate Judaism. I have problems with Judaism. Okay, but that's really nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East.
It's not a religious Jewish movement.
It has attempted to co-opt Judaism.
Yeah.
But in so doing, it has completely transformed a religion into a religious nationalism. Do you understand what that means, Grace? Do you understand the difference between the two things?
Well, yeah, religion is a belief that has to do with God and stuff.
It's
nationalism
like
is
it's like this. It's like this. I'll give you a perfect example.
country.
Richard Spencer, who I've talked with, who found me to be beneath him morally. Interesting. Richard Spencer